In the social sciences, is it necessary to do fieldwork? And what is fieldwork exactly? Well, fieldwork comes from working in a field, and indeed sometimes when you try and translate it literally into many languages, it's rendered more or less as farm work. Working on a farm can, of course, be part of fieldwork. Fieldwork is basically going out to somewhere you call the field, and depending on what your field of study is, that field might look a little different. So for instance, for me, if I go to the field, if I go out to the field, I'm frequently going to, say, Amazonia, and the field for me, therefore, are communities in Amazonia. Why? Because I do anthropological, linguistic, cross-cultural, psychological work there. I look at people's lives, cognition, such as how they think, their environment. I talk with them, I interview them, I learn from them. I'm enriched by going there and collaborating with, learning from them. That's my field. So my field site would be, say, a community where I have friends, collaborators, trusted confidants, all of this, who will then guide me, basically, or where I can develop a project in conjunction and collaboration with them. And that village, that community, that town, that, whatever it might be, hamlet, as it's called, a small collection, right, of houses, things like this. This might be my field as such. So it doesn't have to do as much with the field, say, surrounding it. Say it's an agricultural society and they have a field. It's not that field I'm working in. It's actually that space where I have access to these collaborators and informants, however you want to call these people, who are helping me massively do my projects. That's fieldwork. So why do fieldwork? That question can be answered in the following way. What can't you get from a book? What can't you get from a lab study? What can't you get from, say, statistical processes? What can't you get from that? There's so much that you can't, in fact, and all of that is what I gain from doing fieldwork. Now, I do all of those other things as well. I work with people, especially people who are even far more gifted at statistics than I am. What are the chances? Couldn't tell you. That people will be better than I am. I gain so much from collaborating with people who have these very useful transferable skills, but there's something that I can always add because I myself have been to the field. I've seen how things work. So for me, it holds a special place in my heart, and it might not be for everybody. I think that I do well in that environment. So if you're considering a career in anthropology, linguistics, or any other of these human sciences, consider doing fieldwork. Another advantage would be not just adding something that someone can't get from the lab, but knowing what to do in the lab, knowing what to do in with these other methods, or indeed bringing the lab or maybe even historical text to that field and trying to imagine things fleshed out. There can be pitfalls with that too. For instance, if you're imagining that things work the same way in the past, or did used to work the same way in the past as they work today in your field site, you will be wrong because nothing's 100% the same. However, as I say, you might be put in a different mindset where you thereby see connections that you wouldn't have seen before that turn out to be valid connections, right? You could hallucinate connections, if we want to use the language borrowed from, say, ChatGPT, hallucinating information. You could hallucinate connections. You could see connections that aren't truly there. That is a risk, but I think that can be pruned away, and with more reflection and very critical dialogue with other scholars, you might realize that those connections aren't there. Whereas, if you see the connections that others tell you might not be there, but that because you've been to the field, you've seen the way things work in a very holistic, dynamic way, you might bring fresh eyes to, say, a historical text, or you may redesign a lab study that you realize doesn't make sense out in the real world, so to speak. Those are other huge advantages of fieldwork. And I would really encourage people to do fieldwork. I would say that even if you don't make your whole career as a field worker, if you can even accompany field workers, that would be a wonderful thing. Likewise, field workers need to be grounded in methods that aren't used, quote unquote, in the field, because actually nowadays there are ways to try and take lab-like kits, for instance, just to give an example, say from psychology, whatnot, you can take kits that actually are used in laboratories in a wider setup. You can take a smaller, more condensed version of that to the field in your suitcase, and you can actually start to do certain types of experiments, social, cognitive experiments. I mean, even things like sort of color. Linguists and cross-cultural psychologists have learned a lot about how people seem to categorize color by taking kits, or language that is, say, I mean, I work with something called sound symbolism, whereby you have a sort of evocation or imitation of a sound out there in the world, or a phenomenon out there in the world by a linguistic sound that is not arbitrary. So, again, I say something like tree, and there's nothing t, r, or e-like about the word tree in English. It just happens to mean tree, right? I say tree, you understand I mean wooden thing with leaves, branches, etc. Whereas if I say turus turus in Ecuadorian Amazonian Quechua, for instance, pastasa Quechua, that has a sort of crackly sound contained within the word, and it means a sort of cracking thing, and it's used, cracking sound that's used for the crickle crackle of branches, but also things like people turning into a tree, for instance, right? As their skin turns into the wood, to the bark and the wood of the tree, as happens in the visions of Quechua people in the Ecuadorian rainforest. Anyway, that is evoking something in the landscape. That's evoking something, perhaps even emotionally, etc. There are lots of these kinds of sound symbolic words that contain something of their meaning in their sound already. It's not arbitrary. At any rate, field kits have revolutionized that study, because you can get people to start to talk about texture and light, sound, emotional states, other things with field kits that mirror psychological studies or elicitation, right? The sort of provoking, getting at information. Linguistically as well, but also, as I say, in the categories people think with, cross-cultural psychology, you name it. And so it's really worth combining methods, and it's worth having people who know lab work very well, or as I say, even other fields of work, but say lab work very well, taking those methods to the field. But it's very worth having someone also who's in the field for a long time, at once especially, but also over many years, say, also collaborate with people who, say, work in laboratories or whatever, and to actually have them go either together, or have that field worker take something that is sort of approved by the lab scientist, say, like, this is a robust experiment in the lab, take that to the field, see if it works there, and then come back and say, hey, we need to redesign this, or something of that nature. But again, that sort of backing and forthing, if you will, that sort of dialogue, that constant refinement based on dialogue, that's an important part of really good field work, and it's an important part of field work that will fit into the rest of the social sciences, I would say. So anyway, suffice it to say that field work is super important for any study, really, of humanity, and indeed of animals. Field studies of other animals besides humans what are sometimes called more than human beings or non-human beings. The non is tinged negatively, more is tinged positively. More than human beings, non-human beings. For instance, in our world, non-human animals, etc. Fieldwork is a great way of truly learning about these creatures as much as possible through their own lens, seeing how they truly tick, as opposed to coming in with a lot of preset human notions, doing a few quick experiments which may, if designed without extensive fieldwork, actually confirm what you already assumed about those creatures. Rather, fieldwork-based experiments will probably be more what they call ecologically valid. That is, out there in the real world, it works a certain way, or at least we think, based on careful observation. These experiments are more valid to that reality. At any rate, this is a little bit about what fieldwork actually is. My own fieldwork takes me to Amazonia frequently. I'll also be planning, very shortly, I'll be planning field trips to Belize, for instance. And this is a wonderful thing, to be able to go to multiple parts of the world and see how things work. I do a lot of interviews, for instance, but I also I'm observing 24/7, basically. Well, maybe not 24/7, I do sleep, obviously, at points, but I observe quite a lot, and I also do interviews and recordings, and if I get ethical permission to, I can record quite a lot of aspects of daily life, which really enrich our understanding of cultural diversity, and the people there, of course, go, well, this is our normal life, and I go, well, this is very different for me, but it doesn't matter as much about that. What really matters is that we can then see how a lot of different people throughout the world live, and it shows us a lot of different ways of being human. And indeed, if you record other species, it shows us a lot of different ways of being alive. It shows us a lot of different ways of being a living creature in this world of ours. And to my mind, people who do fieldwork see a lot more of that world, are humbled in that sense that we sometimes wrongly use, whereby you feel humble. Not humbled as in humiliated, nor humbled as in taken down a notch, but well, perhaps too, you feel smaller before the world and nature, but you also, I think, feel enriched and empowered in the sense that you know that you know so little and that you're constantly learning from others, but you can leverage that knowledge. And I think you feel that the things you know, you truly know more because you yourself have experienced them. And that's also the beauty of fieldwork. I'll leave it here for now. Let me know if you like these sort of almost fireside chat, if you will, sort of more casual types of videos where I just sort of talk. I enjoy just sort of talking like that. But it's always, you could make the argument that a very structured video is also something that's great. I'm happy to do those, and I'd like to do those as well. But again, let me know if you're enriched, or you feel validated, or you feel that you thought of something in a new way, perhaps, from these kind of, where I pick my own brain, so to speak, right? There's no cameraman there. I'm just talking directly to you, and I think it's nice to do that once in a while, although I would also like to do some very structured videos with a camera person and with all of this. So, that's fieldwork. Those are my musings on fieldwork. Let me know what you think about them. Let me know if you yourself are trying to do fieldwork, or have done, and as I say, thanks for your attention, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now. Ciao. Take care.